Well, on April 17th, the Tobago People's Party was launched by Chief Secretary Farley Augustine and the executives of the Tobago House of Assembly. Now, following a social media post by the Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, who suggested that the Tobago People's Party does not have the mandate of Tobagonians, well, the Chief Secretary responded by telling the Prime Minister to mind his business. Those were not his exact words, but I'd rather just leave it right there. And now this morning, to expand on this conversation and the repercussions or possible repercussions for both the response by the Chief Secretary, I'm joined by the retired head of the public service, Mr. Reginald Dumas. Good morning, sir.
Morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, sir?
Holding on. Sun shining, and things. I suppose the rainy season might be starting soon. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what. We'll find out whether or not we miss the sun when the rain starts to pour down heavy. But anyway,
it was falling last night, actually.
Yeah, it did. I enjoyed it. But this morning, bright and sunny. Mr. Dumas, let's begin with the Prime Minister's social media post in response to the formation of the Tobago People's Party, suggesting that Farley Augustine, the Chief Secretary, and the rest of the executives do not have the mandate of Tobagonians because they were elected as part of the PDP. What are your thoughts on this? Is the Prime Minister right to suggest that they do not have the mandate of Tobagonians?
Well, of course, they were elected as PDP, and as you know, party split, and they have formed, or are forming, because I'm not sure whether it's official yet, they are forming a new party called the Tobago People's Party. There is nothing in the Tobago House of Assembly Act that I know of to suggest that they have to go back to the polls. There's nothing legal. You might say that it might be ethical, it might be moral, excuse me, but there is nothing legal to suggest that they have to go back to the polls. Mm-hmm. I think that is the position they're taking. Mm-hmm. We will see. I'm not sure that people in Tobago are making a big fuss about this. They're looking really to see how the new party is going to perform, how the current independents are performing or not performing, as the case may be, and how the new party will perform, and then they will make their judgment on that basis. You might say, as I just said, that from an ethical point of view, since they were not elected as Tobago People's Party, that they might wish to return to the polls, but I don't think they're going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Prime Minister actually, given all his years of experience as a politician, was he just trying to ruffle the feathers of the Chief Secretary and succeeded in probably wanting to do so?
Well, he's a politician. How do you expect politicians to behave? They behave like politicians, whatever the titles they hold. And in any case, the PNM in Tobago had been making the same point. So it's a PNM position. It's simply that the Prime Minister, as I don't know whether you were speaking as Prime Minister or political leader, because these two roles, unfortunately, in this country, get confused all the time. That is the case from day one from Eric Williams. But he was speaking and saying, well, look, go back to the polls and taking the position that his party, because the minority bench in the Tobago House of Assembly has been saying exactly the same thing, go back to the polls. Mm-hmm. So there was nothing unusual or surprising, to me at any rate, in the Prime Minister saying so.
Mm-hmm. Well, furthermore, now let's take a look at the Chief Secretary's response. Mind your business. Again, not his exact words, but we leave it there. What do you make of the Chief Secretary's response?
I would not have myself responded in that way. Maybe because my background is, professional background is somewhat different. I'm not a politician, never been, although I think I know a great deal about politics, having seen it at work in various parts of the world, not only Trinidad and Tobago. And generally politicians behave in the same way. I would not have made that remark. I would simply have said, there was a video, as he said, he had a video saying that the Prime Minister said some time ago, look, I'm going to stay out of Tobago people business or take on whatever it is, because that was, again, a political matter when there was some confusion, I believe, between Watson Duke and Farley Augustine, and he was going to stay out of that. And so Augustine plays this video, I replace it because he has a tape of it, and says, so mind your so-and-so business. I would not have reacted in that way. If I wanted to tell the Prime Minister to stay out of it, I would have said, look, here's this video. Prime Minister, keep your word, keep your promise, full stop. And but everyone would have understood what I meant. And there would be no need to ruffle feathers with using four-letter words, although this is not a major four-letter word, quite frankly. People use it all the time, even on the media, even on television, people use it. So I would not have done it that way, but that is the way I see things.
Well, let's just take a look at that. Wouldn't you have not used this in that way because of the language or the I mean, as you just said, the four-letter word is not that strong anyway. People use it even on television all the time. But is it simply because of the language, or is it more to do with the politics of Tobago?
It came over, the phrase came over as impolite and disrespectful. You were talking about respect for elders, whether they're on a different political side or not. And let us face it, Dr. Rowley is old enough to be Mr. Augustine's father. Now, when you say something like that, what message are you sending to younger people? You say you want people to behave in a certain way, that the young must have respect for the elders, etc., and then do this. Suppose, which could happen. Let us say there is something in a classroom in a school in Tobago, and people gets up and tells the teacher, well, mind your damn business. And the teacher says, well, you can't speak to me like that. And the pupil says, well, the chief secretary says so if the chief secretary could play, who is me? So, as I say, there could be repercussions.
But Mr. Dumas, I appreciate the point that you're bringing across. You're speaking from a moral and ethical high ground. Is that even applicable in politics?
Generally, no. But even in politics, you have sometimes to understand diplomacy, and you have to understand language. And there are times in politics when you simply either reply in a certain way or you simply do not reply, because you only aggravate matters. For instance, take this particular issue. Has Dr. Rowley actually replied to Mr. Augustine on what he said there? He has not. So you never know what Dr. Rowley might be, what he might be planning. This might go beyond the question of political party, or whether what the PNM has to say, or what it might do to or with the TPP, might go beyond that to the whole broader issue of the Tobago. And you might find a situation in which Tobago comes out the short end of the stick. So, as I'm saying, you have to be careful, even in politics. You have to be careful about what you say and what you do not say.
Are we seeing a different approach now from Farley Augustine? It seems as though he's approaching things differently, from a different angle, not necessarily as subtle, or I like to even use the term as diplomatic as he was before. All of this has started happening since the resignation, well, not the resignations, the firings from the PDP. It seems to be a different approach. Are we seeing the real Farley Augustine, or is it just frustration?
I don't know. I don't. I know Mr. Augustine, but not at all well. I have met him a few times. I've always been impressed from the time I first met him when he was not in party politics, when he was a teacher at the Speyside School, which is when I was many years ago when I met him first, and I was immediately struck by the quality of his intelligence. I remember speaking to people about it at the time, and I said, I met this young man, and he's really very bright. But being very bright is not always enough. You have to weigh situations and don't just shoot your mouth off because you're feeling unhappy or happy about a particular situation. I don't know if he's yet practicing that. And what I am concerned about in particular, they can fight their political battles. I mean, I don't belong to any party, and I'm not. Let them carry on. You expect politicians to fight. What I am concerned about is the welfare of Tobago. Mm-hmm. Does this have a negative impact on Tobago? Mm-hmm. That is.
Well, let's expand on that for a bit there. Does this have a negative impact on Tobago? How would this outburst between the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, who is a Tobagonian himself, and Chief Secretary Farley Augustine, how does this now affect the welfare of Tobago? Does it even affect the House of Assembly's push for autonomy, which we have not heard much about in recent times?
Precisely. That is one way. I don't know where this bill is. It must be languishing somewhere in some joint select committee or something, lying down there being tended or not tended by some constitutional midwife. I don't know. I don't know what has happened to it. I've heard about it in over a year, quite frankly, which suggests that it's been quietly not put to rest, but put aside. Now, here you have a situation in which this exchange of words, or at least not so much exchange, but what Farley has said, or minding your business, where this has occurred. And you can have a situation in which the government then says, well, okay, if that is the way you want to play it, leave that bill there. You say you want internal self-government, wait some more. Or you can have also a situation in which, remember, the monies that Tobago spends come essentially from Trinidad, from the national budget. It hasn't been allocated to the national budget of Tobago, which is not all that much. But the fact is that because Tobago doesn't really produce any money of its own, any revenue of its own to write home about. There's no manufacturing industry here, et cetera. And although the THA Act does say that revenue and, like, say, taxes on banks, et cetera, and branches in Tobago should be paid into a Tobago fund. The truth is that does not happen in practice. So one here in Tobago is reliant on the central government for developmental funds. Suppose these developmental funds, yes, were paid, but there is a lag. And you're hearing, well, we don't have enough money now to send you. We are going to send you $50 million, but we can only send 25, and so on.
But Mr. Dumas, let me just interject. Do you think that it's rather interesting, it can take a very intriguing twist, that now that the Chief Secretary has told the Prime Minister to mind his business, that the Prime Minister will say, okay, you've just given me excuse, I'll take it quite literally. I'll stay out of the business of Tobago, and we will hold back on the development of Tobago. Is that a possibility?
It's a possibility. I'm not saying the Prime Minister will do it, but it is a possibility. You want me to mind my business? I will mind it. Mm-hmm. You mind yours, I will mind mine. And let's see what happens. Since you depend on me for funds, I will send the funds, of course, because they've been voted by Parliament, but I will send them in my time and at my pace. And if certain people are not being paid because the money isn't there, or because you can't do developmental work because the money isn't there, well, I'm minding my business. I'm still sending the money. I'm just not able to send it as rapidly as you would like.
Do you think that the autonomy bill, the Constitution Amendment, Tobago Self-Government Bill 2020, and the Tobago Island Administration Bill 2021, which are currently before Parliamentary Joint Select Committee, do you think that there has been a deliberate delay?
I would not be surprised if there has not been a deliberate delay, because the two sides are very far apart. You see, the government has taken the position. Let me step back a bit. Essentially, what you are having is a difference of perception and understanding. When people in Tobago say internal self-government, they mean autonomy. Tobago, not an independent state, but a state that will be responsible for certain items of development, whatever they happen to be. The government, however, takes the position that Trinidad and Tobago is a unitary state. Now, I want to make this clear because perhaps a lot of your listeners don't know this. There is no such definition in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. We use this phrase unitary state very loosely and say Trinidad and Tobago is a unitary state, meaning, they're together and everything is run from Port of Spain, etc. But there is no definition of Trinidad and Tobago in the Constitution as a unitary state. The only definition of Trinidad and Tobago Constitution is that Trinidad and Tobago is a sovereign democratic state. But we have become accustomed to believe, and we genuinely believe, that legally Trinidad and Tobago is a unitary state. And there is nothing in the law, in the Constitution, which is the highest law of the land, to support that thesis. So we go on the basis, and again, if you read, you wouldn't have the time, but I mean, if you were to read some of the verbatim records of, say, the last meeting when a team from the central government was over here in Tobago and they talk, you will see Mrs. Camille Robinson Regis, who led the government, talking about the unitary state of Trinidad and Tobago. I said, well, what unitary state? There's no unitary state in Trinidad and Tobago, legally and constitutionally.
So then this has actually helped Tobago's fight.
Politically, but not, it is not a constitutionally, constitutional phrase that you can find in our Constitution.
Mm-hmm. And this definition that is in the Constitution, the one where it says it's a sovereign democratic state, but there's no mention of it being a unitary state. It's become a political term. Does that strengthen the arguments then for Tobago's push for autonomy? Simply because the Constitution does not necessarily define Trinidad and Tobago as a unitary state.
We have the problem of who has the majority. It might be quite right to say that Trinidad and Tobago is not defined in the Constitution as a unitary state. But when the political majority is defining it politically and not constitutionally, and says that it is a unitary state, a problem arises, because it is the majority that will pass the legislation. Mm-hmm. And if the majority has dug its heels in, then there's a problem.
Mm-hmm. You see, Mr. Dumas, something that you've hit the nail on the head on this morning, and I'm glad that you've done it. It's a constant cry of mine. The lack of education within the public about such thing, even the crucial terminology as defined in the Constitution, is oftentimes that lack of knowledge or education is used against us in favor of politicians. So I'm actually very much appreciative that you've raised that. But, as we're running out of time, do you think that the Prime Minister Should he have even, in the first place, stated that he has nothing to do as Prime Minister with the business of Tobago or interfere with Tobago's business?
Well, the Prime Minister, he was of course making a political point, but you can't have a Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago who has nothing to do with Tobago, whether he comes from Tobago or not. So that he was talking politics there. I mean, it is politicians again. That's how they tend to behave. If he's not involved in the business of Tobago, in whose business is he involved, Trinidad? Mm-hmm. It makes no sense. So I'm saying he was making a political point, and referring specifically to what had happened earlier about the political fallout within the then PDP, as it was then constituted. But of course, Tobago is part of his business. Mm-hmm. He's the Prime Minister of the country.
But I know you also mentioned we have to look at where the majority lies. So is it that the Prime Minister making such a statement, it's a political statement, but there are no repercussions for making that statement on a platform?
Politicians say all kinds of things on platforms. You just have to listen to what the Prime Minister said in Togo last weekend, talking to a gathering of his party, which I have criticized already. It ought not to have been said at all. But he said it. And this has been the case from day one. Eric Williams also used to speak as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, or as Premier, but let's say as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, would frequently go to party conventions to announce government policy. This melding of party and government has been afflicting us from day one. It is wrong as far as I'm concerned. I have complained over the decades without, of course, anything, because I have no political power. So I can't say, all I can do is complain and write and say something on WESN. But
Mr. Dumas, are you still with us? Oh, crikey. All right, we've lost Mr. Dumas there. All right, you're back with us, Mr. Dumas.
I'm sorry, my microphone, I have to bring in a technician because it tends to do its own thing.
No worries. Very quickly, final question. Must get this in, actually. Has public opinion in Tobago shifted drastically enough that it could reverse the fortunes of the People's National Movement Tobago Council should an early election, of which they are calling for, be called?
No, I don't think they've shifted so much. Yes, you have a lot of people who are unhappy with what has been happening, especially within this new party to be formed, the TPP or the PDP. Yes, you do have that. And you have a lot of people who have said to me, I work so hard for the PDP and look how they're behaving, etc., etc. But there is still a reservoir of goodwill for Mr. Augustine, and not so much for some of the other members of his team, I regret to say, but certainly for him. And you will still find, I think, if an election were held tomorrow, not that the PDP will win by that massive margin of 14-1. But I would not be surprised if the PDP was still to win, though majority will have shrunk. But they have
Tobago People's Party. Tobago People's Party.
Party, yes.
Mr. Dumas, thank you very much for joining me for this conversation this morning, sir. Taking the high moral and ethical ground, it's very much admirable. You've raised some very good points. And also, your sense of humor actually helps us to digest all of this. So, thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Keep well.